Thank you for tuning in to the SkillsAware podcast. We are a human-centered, AI-powered skills recognition engine transforming how people and organizations understand and grow their capabilities. Each episode features insightful conversations with industry leaders, experts, and innovators who share their knowledge, experiences, and ideas on workforce skills, skills recognition, skills literacy, artificial intelligence, and so much more.
I'm Dan McFadyen, co-founder and director at SkillsAware, and I'm also joined by Yasmin King and Mark Keough, who are both also co-founders and directors at SkillsAware. Well, let's dive right in. It's hard to believe it's been a year since we recorded the Journey So Far video for SkillsAware. So we want to share with you today what has been happening over the past year. But first, let's set the stage. Yasmin, can you fill us in? What is SkillsAware and why is it important?
One of the really big challenges is that we have lots of people with capability in the workforce. The issue is actually that their visibility of their skills is often not seen, and it's also not necessarily interpretable because we don't necessarily measure against standards. And I think what we have really done is said, you can't see what you don't know. So SkillsAware is about making the issue of skills visible and interpretable, and having the evidence that backs that up. And the interpretation is because we measure against a standard. It's not just, I have skills of X, it's I have skills of X measured against a standard. And I think that is a very key differentiation of how we've approached it. And also because we believe that it's also something that individuals need to have and hold, as opposed to organisations. And that's if we're really going to build a economy where everybody can display what they know and what it's measured against, and it doesn't matter where they're working, whether it be within organisation A or B, or whether they're volunteering or whatever they're doing, it's their record and they can show that evidence. And that to me is really the nub of what we've tried to do in the creation of SkillsAware.
Brilliant. And Mark, anything to layer on top
of that?
Just
that the great thing is that it maps. So what the foundation of awareness then maps to recognition of prior learning in vocational education settings, soon into recognition of credit in higher education settings, and also recognition within organisations to support career growth and so on. So we've got outputs, including badge outputs and digital credentials, which mean you can actually use the skills, not just find them.
Wonderful. And yes, you referenced both users as well as institutions and organizations, and I think that's one of the really exciting aspects of SkillsAware is that applicability and benefits across all of those different entities. And over the past year, it's been a wonderful journey with our clients who have been providing us lots of feedback and insights. And I think one of the best quotes just came up recently from JobLink Plus was a quote from Emily, their CEO, on what her objectives are for her employees that are using SkillsAware. And I'll read it out. That she wants her employees to feel seen, to feel validated, that they're receiving a qualification that they can take with them, and that it's not just about the job that those employees do, but it's about the person that they are. Wow, like that's amazing. So can we unpack that, Mark?
I think it's great because there's such strong engagement with the platform amongst your employees because they're getting benefits, and there's even a little bit of a gamification effect in that they focus on the prize, like we're going to get a qualification out of this effort. And so, and because if you look into SkillsAware, we've got a system of scoring the value of evidence. And because there's a sort of score, it has that sort of mild gamification effect. I want to get my score higher, and I want to more easily get recognition against the qualification. And then that's socialized, right? How are you going is amongst the employees who are doing it, and that creates that effect of engagement and purpose. So we're seeing all of that play out with our pilot projects, especially this one with JobLink Plus, as you mentioned.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I think one of the things that often, has occurred in the past is that employers have thought in actually having that external recognition of, for example, internal training and experience that people have on the job, that somehow in having that visible and validated might in some way mean that people will leave them, right? It's that whole argument, we can't afford to do more training. Well, in fact, you can't afford not to. And for us, I think what we're starting to see is organisations recognising that actually validating and making it seen, that those skills visibility seen, actually means you're going to keep those employees longer. It's a retention strategy because they feel that it's actually being recognised, measured, and they're being rewarded, if you like, in terms of having some sort of badge or evidence of it. And that makes people go, well, okay, so in terms of promotional opportunities, etc., when that comes about, it's actually going to be measured against my skills, as opposed to, I was in the right place at the right time talking to the right person, or it's just going to be measured on the job description that I have, which doesn't see the whole me.
Absolutely. Really, really powerful. But we also see SkillsAware being used in a number of different scenarios, right? So the JobLink Plus is one very specific example focused around the organization itself. What are some of the other discussions and other types of models that we've been seeing over the past year?
I think construction is one where we've got a big focus, because you have so many people working beneath their skills capability. And I think that's one of the exciting things that we are really working on is how can we unlock that potential and allow people to have their skills validated and recognised so that they can, specialise in what their expertise is, as opposed to, well, I'll just take a labourer's job because it's too hard for me to get any other recognition. And I think we really... And while I think there's been a concerted effort to try and have people upskill by doing courses, it ignores the fact there's a big opportunity cost for that, particularly for those who already have those skills. They're just not recognised. And so, time taken to do a course, to sit alongside people who might be at a completely different level than you is frustrating. It's opportunity cost of the fact when you're doing that courses, you're not working. All of these things, I think, make it a much more complex thing than just, we'll offer a free course and that's going to solve the problem.
Right. Brilliant. And Mark, you flagged, or you mentioned already higher education, but yeah, can you give us the lens from vocational as well as higher ed?
Sure.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is a lot of interest from both large public and private RTOs, where they recognise there's a national agenda to improve recognition of prior learning or recognition of credit in the university sector. And then the other thing in the university sector is the recognition of skills rather than just academic outcomes. So SkillsAware plays to all of those needs in the marketplace. And so we're seeing good traction in conversations and engagement with TAFEs, with large RTOs, with industry-based RTOs, specific industries, sometimes where they've got issues getting enough training provided because they don't scale. We're seeing in higher ed a desire to find some way of mapping academic outcomes to skill outcomes across the journey of a student's time with them. So all of these things, all of these needs are played directly into with the SkillsAware offering.
Brilliant, brilliant. Let's pivot now, and again, the journey so far. So in the past year, let's talk a bit about the platform and how that's changed. And why don't I kick off on this discussion? But yeah, I know you both will jump in as well. So based on all this incredible feedback as we flagged from users, from institutions, but also from other organizations that we've been in discussions with, we have released our third major rewrite of the platform, including a total overhaul, a total actual rewrite of the user interface, based on that feedback, thinking about the workflows and how do we smooth that, how do we remove friction from the process. And so that has been a major undertaking for us, but it really gives us the platform to move forward with. So that's been incredible. And just recently, we added the endorsement functionality. And Mark, you want to?
Yeah, that's essentially what we've got is an encrypted endorsement possibility. So you can be in SkillsAware and seeking to gain evidence or add evidence for your skill, but there's a button you can press where you can send an encrypted email to a former supervisor or current supervisor or peer and get an endorsement for that particular skill. And that just adds to the evidence base, and it's encrypted, so it's secure, so it's as valid as we can make it. You'd have to work really hard to sort of make that a false claim, you know. So it's a really big strength in that during the time you can gather more evidence, right? You're not just relying on the evidence you already have.
Right, right. And where does where do endorsements fit in the overall model of SkillsAware, right? So we look at a couple different types of evidence.
Yeah. So an endorsement sits in the organizational framework for us. So it's still in the informal recognition category, but it is a very strong score. You get a very good score in your evidence score, the PCI, the personal capability index, which indicates the value of the evidence. And so that's a very important point, that an endorsement is a high value item.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I think that just builds the holistic view that SkillsAware is taking to assemble all this evidence. Yes, I might throw back to you just in terms of evidence, and how does SkillsAware work with all this evidence, but then people, right? Assessors or individuals within organizations. How do those two fit together?
I think one of the things that we have been extremely committed to ensuring is that at the end of the day, the human is the one who makes the ultimate decision, right? And we've designed it that way on purpose. It's been fundamental to our whole process. And I think, everybody knows that it's harder and harder to find trainers and assessors, in particular industry areas. And part of the reason why recognition of prior learning has always been a wicked problem has been that it's a very, very manual process. And even with toolkits, it's still a very manual process. And so what we've tried to do is say, how can we make the ability of those trainers and assessors to use their time in what their skills are, which is making those judgments on the evidence presented to them, and not chasing students saying, you need more, no, you need to send me more bits, or going through the cardboard box of heaps of paper and, mapping. Because the other thing about mapping is that, one piece of evidence is not basically linear, right? I mean, that one piece of evidence needs to be mapped against multiple areas. So, you're doing a lot of repetitive analysis. And of course, AI is a perfect instrument to address that. But ultimately, we're about freeing up the time of those trainers and assessors who are in short supply to actually use their time to use their skills and judgment to do that, and not administrative work. But at the end of the day, it's their decision which is critical. And the information they get presented, they may still go, I want more information on that, or we want more, I want to have another look at that, or whatever, or I think there's a clear gap. But it gives them a really clear picture of what they then need to follow up on.
That's fantastic. And I think one of our strengths is the ability not only to go deep in particular areas, but also to go broad, right? So it's not just an RTO specific solution. It's not just higher ed. It's not just organizational. So I think that's been one of the key factors in our ongoing international expansion and the discussions we're having around the world. Yeah.
Can I say one thing I think, Dan, that really highlights that is people who typically have evaluated themselves on what their current job is. And when they start putting evidence of what their whole history is, somebody who might have quite, for example, a narrow role where they're doing, they don't have a lot of interaction with people because it's not necessary. But when they put in their history and it shows, well, actually, they've done quite a lot of things in their life-wide skills, which meant that they actually have got skills in, for example, communication or working in a quite complex team. But previously has not been seen, and this then opens opportunities for them within their own organisation, because suddenly it's now being seen, and the organisation can go, oh, I had no clue that you could do these things. So I think that's where I think there's a real benefit in having that approach of looking at all someone's skills and not just defining you on what your last job role is.
It's brilliant. And I love that expression, life-wide, right? That's really what we're trying to capture with SkillsAware.
Well, and we've had this pleasant experience of worldwide, right? So isn't it fantastic that we've been able to achieve contracts and pilots and engagement in both North America and in Europe, and that's just, that was unexpected for me that traction would occur. But it seems this skills problem is a global problem. Skills visibility is a global problem, and Australia uniquely has the standardized training package system. Other people in the world don't have that. And so what we're being able to do is take our expertise from that approach and plug into other standards in other countries. And the level of engagement and awareness and wow factor has been really strong in all of those conversations. So we've really enjoyed that. I spend quite a lot of time at weird times of the day in meetings, but I'm very happy to, and very happy to find that we get engagement that's not based on borders. It's based on needs to develop skills recognition worldwide.
Which is brilliant, and I think what we've found and are finding, continuing to learn ourselves as well as share our knowledge is there is so much in common, but then there are also those national or regional or other nuances or frameworks that we can apply on top. Are we seeing?
Sorry, I was just going to say, and the human in the loop means that, because there are different regulatory frameworks, etc., that exist, it enables you to basically customize this so that the fact that internationally somebody might say, oh yeah, but our system's different, that doesn't matter, because a skill's a skill, right? And if you measure the skill against what your standards are, but we're not saying, and then we'll tell you that that's okay, it's going to be your people in your environment that is going to make the ultimate decision. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world.
That's great. Yes. I think one of the exciting aspects that I really appreciate is the ability that we have to go very wide. So if an organization or users want to leverage our library of more than 73,000 skills and competencies, they certainly can. And to your comment around life-wide, well, it's a very wide set. But then we also have some clients who are very focused in a particular niche, and that might be for registration or some other qualification, some other aspect. And so they do want it to be tailored there. But I think that ability for people to discover even for themselves that that broad set of skills and capabilities. Um, and I think that's been borne out in some of the usage that we've seen, where people add more and more evidence as they see their skills IQ increasing, and that confidence indicator inside of SkillsAware. It's really exciting to see how they're pushing the platform, but also saying, well, I want recognition for what I do through work, but also here's my passion, or here's how I volunteer, or this is something that I used to do, and maybe I want to get back into it, or they're learning about how some of their skills are transferable into different sectors. And I think working with some of the different groups, such as veterans transitioning into civilian life, or immigrants, migrants who are looking to improve their life. And there was also a report issued just a couple of weeks ago around that there's more than 340,000 immigrant women in Australia alone who are operating below their skills, below their qualifications, because they're just not able to get those skills recognized here in Australia.
Mm.
And then if we take that to the global stage, we look in America, there's STARS, those skilled through alternate routes, more than 70 million of individuals who do not have an undergraduate degree, and yet they have these lifeline skills. So much going on, so much potential. So let's talk about potential and where we want to take the platform in the future.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that's we haven't explored deeply yet is the whole impact of skills on risk management and overall organizational capability. So we've focused a lot on mapping to qualifications for qualification outcomes or certification outcomes. What I see in the future is we're going to be able to work with organizations around their risk and capability. I'm seeing a future where a range of systems, not just SkillsAware, make the LMS a bit redundant, and the notion that you push people through boring e-learning courses just so you can keep your risk framework, right? What a better way of doing it than having a skills evidence recognition system. So the evidence is not just that you sat and clicked a few buttons on an e-learning course, right? The evidence is what you do in your job, right? Much stronger, much more opportunities. So I'm seeing that as a future focus, and that will become industry specific because different industries have different regulatory requirements. So I'm looking forward to some future projects in that area. They're just early engagements with clients about that capability, but I reckon that's a future thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think that certainly in Australia, we spend a lot of money on training, right? A significant amount, and it's increasing, and yet productivity is poor, right? So clearly it is not spend more money increases the capability of people. So something's going wrong. And if you actually, recent report talked about how much is wasted training, right? It's, to Mark's point, doing it for compliance reasons. But if it's not actually changing behaviours and impacting, then, it's not money that's being targeted spent. And so where I think we will see a real opportunity moving forward is also in the area of how can you make sure that compliance training is about actually being targeted and upskilling, as opposed to just, well, I've got to repeat it. I know from my past life in a role as small business commissioner in New South Wales, I had one guy come and see me. He had 21 white cards, right? Because every company that he went to work for would say, oh, you've got a white card, but I don't know that provider. I want it from this provider, because they weren't looking at what he'd actually done to get those white cards. They were just looking at, it's a white card and it was delivered by X, and they didn't know X. Whereas if that had been instead, yes, you've got a white card, but these are the evidence of the skills that I learned while I did that, that then becomes a different conversation. And I think that's where I think there's a real opportunity to stop the repetitive compliance training and actually make it targeted.
Fantastic. And ultimately productivity, throughout the entire journey, but then also unleashing that human potential, right? So that
Absolutely.
they're not wasting time, they're not getting knocked back for opportunities where they could be delivering.
I mean, I think people underestimate how much application tracking systems, they really operate on quite specific words and targets and quite frankly biases, which means there's a lot of people who, if they don't understand that, basically miss out on ever getting a start. And it's going to become even more critical in a world where there's less and less entry-level jobs, because we're already seeing people require for an entry-level job 3 to 5 years experience. Right? Now, how as a young person do you get that, right, if you haven't even had your first shot? And so being able to really validate the life-wide skills that you've had, which might have been working in as a barista somewhere, or working, and in your family's retail business or whatever it is, but actually being able to codify that against standards might mean that you will have something to deflect that. Well, you've got no experience, so I won't even look at you.
Perfect. And yes, you mentioned particular industries in the past, such as construction. Are there certain ones that we're focusing on now, and then do we see that expanding? And then probably a question to both of you around international opportunities. Do we think the same challenges are faced in construction here in Australia as well as globally? Do those vary? Are we seeing the same thing? And then where do we take things internationally?
Well, if I just use the example of the discussions that we're having in the UK, I know construction is absolutely facing the same in Europe as it is here. And I think that is one of the incredible advantages that we have, is that a skill is a skill, right? I mean, there might be slight nuances of difference internationally, but a lot of the same challenges that we see here are being seen everywhere. How do you unlock the capability of young people in a environment where there are less and less entry jobs happening everywhere? How do you ensure that older people basically have the opportunity to work when a lot, again, application tracking systems tend to basically, sort of make judgments as to whether if somebody's over the age of 50, they're not even going to get a look in. Well, in an aging population and with the demographic challenges that are happening, particularly in the Western world, we won't be able to afford to do that. And, the 50-year-old of today is not the 50-year-old of, 20 years ago. I mean, the length of time that people are being active and living is getting longer and longer. And yet we're still making decisions about that as though, we're in the 1950s, right? So I think there's so many of these challenges exist internationally, and the only way you're going to address that is by getting rid of some of those biases of how people employ, to actually look at facts, right? Look at evidence, and that's where I think we're going to have a really big impact, and that's a challenge that's being seen everywhere in the Western world, not just in Australia.
Yeah, very clearly. And the work I'm doing in Canada is same. Canada has a framework, the Red Seal framework, for recognition of registered occupations, so all the trades and so on. Similar, different, but similar. And so SkillsAware plays directly into that. We just change the labels and change the framework and do the same process. So that's going well. And their construction, energy, transfer from industries that are in decline to new industries, big everywhere. It's a big challenge all over the world. So, but Dan, if I said to you, what's the biggest challenge we have, what would you say? Would it be what's the toughest thing about you know, this kind of engagement process?
That's a great question. I think one of the wonderful things we've seen is what it is not. It's getting engagement from people, just as because everyone recognizes this challenge and this problem. I think what we're seeing is probably the challenge of individuals thinking about how they can take this information and work it into their processes and see that flow, because it's information they've never had at their disposal before. And yeah, as you flagged, the applicant tracking systems and how so much of this information gets lost, right? You lose that fidelity. So now we're presenting organizations, individuals, institutions with true high fidelity information.
Yeah.
So it's then that challenge of, wow, okay, what do we do with this information? And I think that's where, with our experience with our clients so far, we can take that to others and say, well, here's the low hanging fruit. Start here, but then let's look at that bigger picture to take full advantage of all this data.
And to that point, I think there's a skills literacy problem. People just don't really. There's been poor definition of what a skill actually is. Like, everyone seems to know what it is, except if you ask them, right? Tell me what a skill is, right? And people get flummoxed at that point. Oh yeah, well, you know what a skill is. We know what a skill is. So I think that plays into that. If you've got good definitions of skills and good skills literacy, then the fidelity becomes a useful tool, in the hands of those people. So I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges. And of course, we've joined, a number of organisations like Jobs and Skills Australia and their work on the national skills taxonomy, and there's similar work going on all around the world. We joined that as an educator. So, we've put a lot of time and effort into the webinar series, and, Yasmin, you're facilitating an industry-based one coming up, which is great. I did one on standards, standards for, we've got 6 episodes of that as available as education. I think the idea that we're participating in a new knowledge base is really exciting.
Yeah, because I think even some of and I think it gets down to the point that I know Mark is passionate about, and which is data standards. And if you look at, it's not enough to just have a definition. It also needs to be able to be measured at scale, right? That's a really, really critical point. And I think if you look at, for example, in the US, where they use things like Lightcast and Burning Glass, they're all based on job descriptions, right? And, we would say, well, job descriptions are actually a very narrow piece of evidence to evaluate against. And I think that's where we're going back to first principles of, what's the skill, what's measurable, right? And that measurable piece is absolutely critical, because otherwise, you're just basically trying to retrofit something. You're not actually doing it from first principles. And I think that's been one of the hardest things, I think, for people to grasp, is that you need to have data standards, it needs to be measurable. You also need to use open standards as well, because if you're talking about solving a problem internationally, you've got to have it so that it is readable in different jurisdictions. So, yeah, I think there's some of the issues. I mean, I would add the one thing that I think, apart from skills literacy, is finding people who are innovators, who are who have the leadership capacity to go, yep, the system's not working, we need to do something different, and having to champion doing that. And we've been fortunate enough to find some of those. I just wish there were more.
So it sounds like we're making the call out to innovators around the world. Yes, please,
yeah.
please reach out. We'd love to explore the opportunity to work together. Well, that's great, and we've covered so much ground. We could go into a lot more detail. And And again, it is amazing that it's been a year since the last time we did the journey so far discussion with the three of us. And clearly a year, too much changes in a year. So you've talked about the webinar series, Mark, and and both of you have been very active in those. So where do people find those? How often do we do
Sure.
those?
Well, I'd always just recommend, if you want to follow up on any of these ideas, start with the website. It's comprehensive, has plenty of workflow information. Follow our blog there, and also the webinar series is available there really openly. The standards one's available in the upcoming industry-based focus webinar. A very good recent international webinar we participate in, and we're a co-presenter of as the Learner Voice. That's just a great gives an international perspective. So any of those things are available on the skillsaware.com website.
And subscribe. Subscribe.
There's more coming. Yeah.
Because we won't spam you. You will. I mean, everything we send out is very targeted to make sure that you're actually going to learn something by looking at it. It's not white noise. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in this space, subscribe to our newsletters.
Fantastic. Join the community. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Yasmin. Thank you, Mark. Another great discussion, and much more.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. Yes.
Yeah. Pleasure. And looking forward to the next one of these and continuing the dialogue with the global skills community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning into this SkillsAware podcast episode. Don't forget to follow us on your podcast app so you don't miss a thing, and be sure to visit our website at skillsaware.com to learn more.